CD, audio in here. And she went to many historical sites in China to research the ancient poets, and she's going to talk about her project. Okay, so she spent a lot of countless hours writing and producing this book, okay, and making the movie and all this stuff. Okay, so let's give Jeanette Du a hand.
My name is Jeanette Du, and I'm a singer, a composer, an actress, and a writer. But mostly, I am an educator. I start to be a 17 years freshman teaching assistant at Nankai University in China. It was the alma mater of Premier Zhou Enlai and his wife Deng Yingchao. I would say this is the most pleasant and exciting moment in my life. After 7 years of non-stop hard work without any financial support except my own as a part-time professor, after having gone through numerous obstacles, dilemmas, and adventures, finally this project, this package has been released on the international book market by Beijing Language and Culture University Press. With Mr. and Mrs. Deng and another gentleman's help, I'm able to stand in front of all of you to share this multimedia package. I'm deeply honored, touched, and gratified. Now the next part, I'm going to talk how the project came about. In 2004, my mother's sudden death made me very heartbroken about this project. To start with like a dedication to my loving mother and expanded into an international program. Now we got to the third part, is the introduction of the Chinese poetry. This is the major part of this presentation. Okay. As you may not be aware, China has been a nation of poets and poetry for over 3,000 years. Chinese poetry is always regarded as a national treasure. It always held an essential place for the humanities. History, culture, language, anything one can think of related to humanity, it would be included in the Chinese poetry. In comparison with the other kind of poetry, Chinese poetry has its own very special characteristics. Extremely concise. The shortest poem can be only 16 syllables earlier, prior to Tang Dynasty. Start from Tang Dynasty, the shortest poems can be 20 characters. One character always equals to one syllable in Chinese language. The shortest poem is 5 characters in one verse, and there are only 4 verses, so 20 syllables. But this 20 syllables, it can create a beautiful scenery, can create a beautiful philosophy ideas, anything you can think of. So the extremely concise is one of the major characteristics. Secondly, due to the Chinese language dialects all tonal, so when the poets compose their poems, they had their restricted rules to follow, the phonologic rules. Okay, they call the 平平仄仄仄平平平仄平平平平仄. There is a book one should learn. Each character associated with the next one. You cannot put any character there. You have to consider the rhyme, the harmony. So because of these characteristics, Chinese poem is especially musical, rich in rhyme, and easy to remember, to recite. Ancient Chinese poems has historically used as a teaching material for all level of schools, including a child above 2 years old. It's just a Chinese poem is profoundly built into the Chinese culture. Look at my jacket. This is the second poem in the book. Part of the poem is printed here. As soon as I saw this jacket, I said, oh, master get it. It's so interesting. So Chinese poems all over. You don't know where, oh, this is the poem in my project. Oh, there's another poem in my project. Because everybody knows a lot of ancient Chinese poetry. The number of the poem one can handle is always regarded as the sign of the educational level and the cultivation. The Chinese culture, music, and the poem, those things are combined together. As a matter of fact, the Chinese poetry is really, really, one cannot tell what's a song, what's the difference between poems and songs. For example, the first collection of Chinese poetry called the Shi Jing in Chinese. One of the names in English translation is the Book of Songs, because 50% of the poems, they were from folk songs. So the Chinese poetry was designed to be songs. In the old days, all those ancient Chinese people, when they recite the poems, they had their local tones along with reading. In the old, they didn't read. They had their special tones to go along with the poetry. So the Chinese poetry was a combination of language and music. Chinese poetry has over 3,000 years of history, but the golden period was Tang and the Song dynasty, which is roughly 1400 years ago. Okay? And among these numerous poets, there were two, one called Li Bai, one called Du Fu. Li Bai was regarded as the best romantic poet in Chinese history, and people consider him as an immortal of poetry, because no one can write a better poem than Li Bai. And Du Fu is considered to be the best realistic poet. It's also regarded as the sage of poetry. So in the Chinese history, they were called Li Du. In reality, Li Bai was more popular than Dufu, there are two reasons. One reason is because Dufu's works mostly describe the wars, the sorrows of the people, while Li Bai was a romantic personality, kind of like a hippie. He liked to drink wine, and he always got drunk. When he drank wine, his poem is more fascinating. So because of his personality and his work is more welcomed by common people. Today we are going to introduce his poem called Evening Thoughts of Home, and it's only 20 syllables. This poem has been well known by just about every Chinese. Why this poem is so popular? Because this poem is very down to earth, the language is easy to understand, and also the homesickness is a very mutual feelings between the travelers and their family members. I would say as a Chinese, they don't know this poem, maybe we'll put a question mark, are you Chinese? Just no one will missing that one. So you're very lonely in a far remote area. Why is it the moon? Because the moon is hometown family member, and the traveler will share the moon. They all share the same moon. The moon is the connection between the traveler and their family. The second one is Dawn in Spring. The poet woke up hearing those choirs by hundreds of birds, and he feels that the nature, the enjoyment of spring, full of vitality. But he started to recall that last night there was a clamor. So he was feeling sorry for the clamor destroyed so many beautiful flowers. So he was infused between those two spring messages. It indicates that one's life is not always perfect. There are happiness as well as the sorrows. So by listening this poem, by thinking of the philosophical meanings of this poem, we can have a better understanding of life. Unconditional maternal love, even very plain, but in the past 1400 years, it touched many travelers' hearts and many family members' hearts. This is the origin of this project. Without my mom's sudden death, without my wonderful mother's unconditional love, without the poet Meng Jiao's Traveler's Ode, perhaps there is no such a package to share with you. So I alone own my loving mother and the great poet Meng Jiao and gratitude. This is today's presentation. I hope everybody can learn a little something from it. Thank you very much.